Hola guys, welcome to my channel. In this video, I'd be ranting about loop order in a custom water cooling setup and if it matters or not. Long story short, it doesn't really. It has a bit of an impact, yes, but it's near negligible, so meh. And yeah, before I proceed, timestamp and time bar below. Its description will be in the description field. Feel free to skip ahead. So in this video, I'd be sharing with you guys some graphs, and by the near the end of the video, a table comparing the two loop orders I made. Yeah, and for monitoring, I used HWINFO 64 to record the logging. And for the hardware, I have a 360 rad, 1080 rad, 4090, and Horizon 50 5800X, I believe. And for the temperature sensor, I use the Corsair something with fan hub and temperature probes. And yeah, and a D5 pump. So those are my hardwares. And for the viewing, for the LogViewer, in the hardware info forum, I saw two users sharing their applications. First one's from Tom. The one from Tom, you'd have to download the software and run it, and pretty good software. You can see that later on. And the other one's from Leo. Really convenient. You could access it in a web browser using web browser, so really convenient. But I did encounter a bit of a problem, but more on that later on. So there you have it. Without further ado, let's continue. Let me just close my face. There you go. So in this presentation, I just want to start off with the ideal loop, guys. A bit of advice. It's a good idea to have the most heat generating component after or at the last part before the radiator. In this case, it's typically the graphics card, right? So ideal loop, PumpRes combo, it goes to the CPU, GPU, then a radiator. Depending on your loop design, another radiator maybe, and then it'll repeat the cycle, right? And typical loop order, my loop order before, it goes PumpRes combo, CPU, radiator, maybe add a pump here if your loop's big enough, right? The size of the water loop, custom loop, and a GPU here, a radiator there, and it'll repeat the cycle. Again, guys, in regards to custom water setup, it's the flow rate that we have to pay particular attention to. If you think the flow rate or the size of your loop's big enough that it'll compromise your flow rate, it's a good idea to add a pump in there somewhere. And I just want to share with you my personal loop order. Well, it says here it's my personal loop order, but it's changed. Before, it used to be PumpRes combo, GPU, radiator, CPU, and it goes to another radiator, and then it goes outside the case and being cooled down even more by an external 1080 radiator that's being used in this video actually. And it'll go back into my computer case, PumpRes combo, GPU, and it repeats the cycle. With this setup here, it provides me an average of 4 degrees Celsius delta temperature from ambient during a high workload. But due to space constraints, I actually removed the 1080 radiator from my loop. I decided to utilize that for my test bench there. So this computer right now, the loop is now PumpRes combo. It actually goes to the GPU, radiator, CPU, then the radiator repeats the cycle. The first radiator here is a 360 rad, and the second radiator here is mounted along the side panel, right? It's a 240 rad. And this particular loop provides an average of 15 degrees Celsius delta from ambient. Not really a big deal since I'm still getting pretty good temperature for both my cores, right? Both the GPU and CPU cores, so no problem there. But if you'd notice, I'm actually not following the ideal loop order where the CPU, a good idea is the CPU will go first, then the GPU. But due to my computer case and layout or loop design, I'm unable to, because it doesn't really look that nice because of the fans and the cards that's inside. It's restricting me to put the CPU first, is all I'm saying. Anyway, more in towards the end of the video, I'll be showing you guys that it doesn't really matter. All right. So here are the graphs, guys, and for this graph I'm using Tom's application. Again, its link will be in the description field below, though you'd actually have to download the application first and run it before you could actually use it, right? And here are the temperatures, water temperatures for all 4 components. For the first loop's the red line. The first loop goes 1080 rad to the GPU water block, then 360 rad, then CPU water block, and it repeats the cycle. For the second loop, it's the green line from the GPU to the CPU to the 360 rad to the 1080 rad, and it repeats the cycle. If you'd notice here, guys, on the left side, as the test starts, the second loop order, the green line, is actually starting from 26.1 degrees Celsius here in the 1080 radiator, right? It's showing 26 degrees because I actually forgot while I was running the test, I actually forgot to start recording the logging in hardware info, so I had to restart the test, though I failed to consider to cool the water down first. I just simply ran the test again. So but doesn't really matter in my opinion, since I'm more concerned about the maximum temperature and computing its average value. It's pretty much the same, guys. So there you go. That's the reason why the temperature as the test started for the second loop order is a bit higher. In this second picture, guys, it's the 1080 radiator versus the 360 radiator for both loops. I just wanted to show you guys a comparison with the radiator's cooling capability, right? Again, feel free to pause the video and just manually zoom in. In this third picture, it's a CPU core versus the GPU core, or CPU die versus the GPU core temperature. So here is the radiator output and the GPU core temperature. I just want to say, guys, the 1080 radiator will always be the source for the GPU water block. And yeah, that's the graph there. Just don't forget to compare the red line to each other and the green line to each other, just so that it's not confusing. It won't be possible in Tom's LogViewer to overlay both of them. To be fair with other LogViewer, it's easier there, but more on that later on. And in this third graph, it's the 360 radiator out and the CPU core temperature or die temperature. Right now, it's only the red line, the first loop order. And this one here is the second loop order, where the water source for the CPU water block is actually the GPU water block. So here's that picture. So this one is Leo's LogViewer. And again, the link for this page will be in the description field below, and you can actually use your web browser to access this LogViewer, right? It's a really great tool in representing the graph, right? But it has its own bugs. More on that later on. This is for the first loop order, guys, and for the first loop order, we'll use the 1080 radiator as the baseline, right? After the 1080 radiator, it'll go to the reservoir and then go to the 360 water block, or rather the GPU water block. So here's the GPU water block, and as we can see, the temperature increased, which makes a lot of sense. And after the 360, or rather after the GPU water block, it'll go to the 360 radiator. After passing through the water cooler, or rather after passing through the 360 rad, it cools down a bit. And then the last component's the CPU water block. The CPU water block, it warms up again. And this is the bug I'm referring to, guys. If you notice here, guys, the CPU out, the CPU temperature after passing through the 360 radiator, it results to 30.6 degrees Celsius for the water temperature after it passes the CPU water block, right? But if you take a note at the GPU water block, it's 29.7. So basically the CPU water from the CPU water block should be warmer, but in the graph it's showing a decrease actually, because you know what, I'll make this red and the CPU wants the green one, right? In the graph it's showing a decrease in temperature, but the actual value is showing an increase. So anyway, we'll continue using this viewer as it we can pretty much still get the pretty good picture, even though the this image is not really accurate. But anyway, since we're here, I'll show you. I'll remove that. I'll remove that one. I'll just show you guys the CPU temperature in relation to the water source, right? Now, again, guys, the representation is not that accurate. If you notice, the CPU is actually 80 degrees Celsius and the 360 is only 29.7, so it's averaging about 50 degrees Celsius delta, right? So you might be concerned with this value here where it's pretty near the CPU temperature. It really isn't, guys. So anyway, all right, guys, so this is now the second loop order, where again, let's start with the 1080 radiator. After the 1080 radiator, it'll go to the GPU water block. It'll go to the GPU water block where it increases in temperature. And let's zoom in a bit. There you go. I'll change this color to yellow. There you go. And after the GPU, it'll go to the CPU water block. There you go. Again, guys, the temperature here in the image is showing a reduction, but actually it heats up even more. From 29.7 it goes to 31.4. Not really that accurate, but I just want to continue using this one. Still, it kinda gives us a better picture of it, right? Though not really accurate. That's why I opted to start with Tom's LogViewer, right? And the last one here, after the CPU water block, is the 360 radiator. There you go. Now I'll remove this one. No. There you go. And here it's showing. I'll make this red. And this one green. This one I'll remove for now. There you go. But in regards to the radiator, it seems accurate enough, where after passing through the 360 radiator, it's being cooled down even more by a lot by the 1080 radiator. So that's pretty good representation there. And just for quick comparison, I'll show you guys the CPU temperature versus the water source, right? So the water source for the GPU is not really being shown properly. So the red one's the GPU out, or GPU water block, the water source, and the CPU is the 80 degrees Celsius. It's showing here that it's actually cooler, even though it's not. But yeah, there you have it, guys. Generally, I just wanted to show you guys this one just to show you the delta temperature in regards to the the value, actual value. Now, which will bring us to the next one, the table format. So here's the summary, guys. Here's the loop orders being described here, and what component goes to after, right? So let's start with the first one here on the left side. From the 360, it'll go to the 380. From the 360, it'll go to the 1080 radiator. So from 30.7 water output of the 360 rad, it averages 29.35, and as it's being cooled down even more by the 1080 radiator, it goes down to 28 degrees Celsius and an average of 26.69, and it's being warmed up by the GPU to 30.6, average of 29.66, and the CPU, the last component in the loop, it warms up to 31.9 maximum, average of 30.46, and it'll cycle back to the 360 radiator where it'll help bring down the temperature again, right? And the second loop order, let's start with the 1080 radiator. From the 1080 radiator, it'll go to the GPU. You know what? Let's start with the 360 rad. 360 rad, it'll go to the CPU, but it cools down the temperature first, right? 29.9, 29.59, and at the CPU, it warms the water up to 31.8, average of 31.26, and then it'll be cooled down by the radiator. It cools it down to 27.8, an average of 27.13, and then being warmed up again by the GPU, 30.8, an average of 30.17. And it'll repeat the cycle starting at the 360 radiator. But do take note, guys, technically from the reservoir, the 1080 radiator is the first component in the, or rather the 1080 radiator is technically the last or the first, depending on how you look at it, right? Component in the loop, right? So here, CPU delta from H2O source, so they're pretty much negligible, guys. 50 degrees Celsius, 50.5, 50.6, 50.1, and 18.5, 18.52 for the GPU core temperature from H2O source. Do take note, guys, the water source for the CPU water block for this white area here, it's the GPU. This one here, right? And the water source for this grayed out area here is the 360 radiator. Okay, so anyway, bottom line, guys, it averages at 50 degrees Celsius. In my opinion, pretty much negligible. And the GPU water source for both of these will always be the 1080 radiator, guys. And as we can see, 18.5, not that much of a difference. And the water temperature for both loops, it averages 26.69 versus 27.13. So there you have it, guys. I really hope you find this helpful. Anyway, I really hope you find this helpful. There's not much video about this. There are a lot of videos I've seen commenting that it'll equalize eventually, because the water will stabilize as it spreads across the entire loop, right? That's fairly obvious, but seeing this helps me, make things clearer, something like that. So I really hope you like this one. And yeah, in regards to loop order, I hope this proved that it doesn't really matter, but obviously it does in some parts. It's not like you can put the pump here and the reservoir here, right? That doesn't make any sense at all. But in regards to component placement, it's near negligible, so it should be fine wherever you put it. In my case, I actually put my GPU first before the ahead of the CPU, right? But my temperature is pretty stable still, so I'm not getting any problems there. So there you have it. Again, I really hope you liked it. It was really difficult setting the thing up, and I'm glad I did it. And as always, guys, see you in the next one.